everybody. This is Russ Hamilton, and I just got done making a whole bunch of modifications to my IWI, or Magnum Research Baby Eagle 2 in 45 ACP, and all these things that I'm going to explain to you that I've done will work on your pistol, and shouldn't matter what caliber it is. Unfortunately, this isn't your classic complete disassembly, reassembly video. I'm going to refer you to the one that, a good one I found, that's going to show you a lot of the little stuff. Okay, so like I said, I know a lot of people are going to be aggravated. I'm not pulling this thing apart and putting it back together. Frankly, I've pulled it apart and put it back together about 15 times in the last week, so I'm rather kind of tired of pulling it apart. So let's see, a couple things that we'll talk about on the slide assembly. Okay, as you all know, there's no aftermarket parts for this pistol. Nothing that I've found out there, unless you get lucky with something EAA or maybe CZ. And a lot of the important parts are impossible to find. So the first thing I did with the slide is I removed the firing pin spring. And when you pull this out, you're going to see that spring seemed like damn near 3 inches long. Okay. So, because I've lightened the hammer spring on this, and I'll get to that in a minute, you have to lighten the firing pin spring. And essentially the only thing that I could do was cut the spring. So I cut about 3/4 of an inch off of that spring, left enough so that the spring still sticks out the end here and will still provide some pushback against the firing pin, so it can't just travel back and forth in there on its own. Even if you drop it, I think there's still plenty of retention in there to keep the spring from going forward. You'll have to be the judge of that, but it works. And if you want, you can try to find a firing pin block spring if you want to try to replace that one. I think I might have done that a long time ago. And there's a few assortment out there. So on to this. This is the important part and what's going to make all the difference. You're going to end up with almost like a brand new pistol. You're going to be stunned and amazed at how good this thing is. So I'm going to start with the latest thing that I just got done doing, and that was really the icing on the cake for this pistol. And if you look at this piece right here, what is the name of it? It pushes the trigger bar up as you pull the trigger in double action and a little bit in single action. Okay. If you look at that video that I mentioned earlier, this does come apart. You have to compress it, and there's a tiny microscopic sized roll pin in there. It's not actually a roll pin, it's a pin though, that you can remove, and you can sand and polish this pin here. But what I did, because of all the tension that was actually on the spring that the factory used, which is really heavy, I replaced it and inserted I think it's a Gray Guns SIG P226 firing pin spring, reduced weight firing pin spring. They're virtually the same size. The firing pin spring is a little bit longer, but virtually the same dimension, and replaced it with that. And in testing this pistol, since I did that, it still functions and works the way that it should. It performs its duty of pushing the trigger bar up, but it's not pushing on it so hard that it's causing grit a gritty feel to it, which I had before I swapped that spring out. So that is a really big change, and it made a massive difference in the way that this pistol feels. So again, that was a SIG, I think it was a P226, probably even a P220 firing pin spring, reduced weight that I got from Gray Guns. You can probably get them from other locations as well. Huge, huge, huge difference. Okay, the next thing I did is, you can see the trigger pin here. Okay, and I'm going to come around to the side. I'm going to go here. I'll just turn the pistol on its side. Okay, this is a Cajun Gunworks free-floating trigger pin, and I think they cost about $26 or so. Cajun Gunworks, but it replaces the roll pin, which is a real pain to get in and out. You still will probably have to use a slave pin, but using this pin, you just kind of push it in, push it out. You don't need to hammer away at it. Makes this job way, way easier to get your trigger pin in and out. Unfortunately, I haven't found anything to replace this pin back here. I think it's a spring pin for the hammer. Hopefully I'll find something one of these days to replace that. Now, like I said, there are no aftermarket parts for this that I can find, other than you can try EAA parts, but really they're still factory parts. So if you want to reduce the trigger weight on this pistol, what I found, and works perfectly, is a Smith & Wesson J-frame rebound spring. Right now I've got an 11-pound model in mine. It's a Smith & Wesson J-frame revolver rebound spring. It's the same size as the hammer spring, but it's lighter, and it makes the action much lighter. And I haven't taken this out to the range yet, but I'm very, very confident it's going to work and function perfectly. And that is about it. I did a lot of polishing on the internal parts in here. Get this guy to stand up again. On the trigger bar, you may be able to see that or not. There's a lot of polishing on the trigger bar. I would leave the sear and those components alone. Just let those break in naturally. You can take the sear cage apart, and if you want to polish the edges on the sear assembly here, after you've taken it apart on the sides, on this side and that side, that's always a good thing to do. But just be careful. I would stay away from trying to polish the sear and the hammer. What are they called? Where the hammer engages the sear. I just at a loss for a moment right now as to what that's called. But that is about it. Just those few changes turn this pistol into something that I'm happy to take to the range every day. It doesn't have that horrible, awful, ridiculously heavy trigger pull in double action or single action anymore. It's very reasonable. It's a very nice action now. It's comparable to some of my older SIGs that I've got. So hopefully that helps you out. And I am telling you, if you make those changes, you're going to have a completely new pistol when you get done with it. It'll be amazing. So just use that video. The guy's got a good video to take it apart and disassemble it. When you've got it pulled apart, if you have those parts that I mentioned already on hand, you just replace the factory parts with the parts that I mentioned and put it back together. Grease it up and put it back together. And I guarantee you, you're going to have a really, really nice pistol when you're done. Now, I'm going to warn you, when you remove this, the magazine release, there is the tiniest detent in there that you've got to be extremely careful about not losing, because I have no idea where you'd get a replacement if you do lose it. And that's going to pretty much render this gun inoperable if you lose that detent. And it is tiny. It's about as small as that little tiny pin that is inside this component right here when you take it apart. That tiny little roll pin that's in there. So you got to be really, really careful not to lose those. You could create a new roll pin. You could make a new one. Maybe you could make a new detent pin for the mag release if you had to. But you really don't want to lose that detent that's in there. And that's about it. I didn't do anything else to the recoil spring. That's still for 45. And like I said, this is going to work regardless of the caliber. Of your pistol. But I promise you those things are going to transform it into like a brand new, completely different gun if you try what I said. I was so disappointed with this thing after I got it home. I figured I could do a couple small, easy things to it and get it fixed up, but I really couldn't until I learned more about CZs. And I've learned how to take all my guns apart and put them back together, and I've since taken another crack at this thing. And man, it is truly amazing. Now, here, I'm going to put it back together and I'll show you. Okay, I got it put back together. I got out a trigger weight measurer, and there's what I got. That's double action, 7 pounds, 36.6 ounces. That's just off of one pull. But I mean, this thing was like over 12 pounds when I first started this project. It is now really, really nice and smooth. Okay, and then there's my single action, 3.5 pounds. And that may be able to go down a little bit more. I'm going to try monkeying with the hammer spring a little bit more in there, which is essentially, well, it is a Smith & Wesson J-frame rebound spring, 11-pound rebound spring. I don't think they make them any lighter than that, so I may have to cut it, cut a coil or two off of it, and just see what happens. I've ordered 3 of them so I can experiment with it and see how it goes. But that is way less than what it used to be. I think it was around 5.5 pounds single action. And I got it down to about 4.5, but then I still had the last issue, which came down to being that pin that pushes up on the trigger bar, and that really was the icing on the cake to solve the rest of the mystery. So again, hopefully nobody hates me too bad for not doing a complete disassembly, reassembly. I wasn't really planning on making a video for this, but I've seen a lot of people out there that are looking for help. And if you follow my suggestions on the video to use, which I already mentioned, and replace the parts that I suggested replacing with what I suggested, you're going to have yourselves a really nice, completely new pistol to shoot that's going to be really enjoyable to shoot. So, hope this helps. Have a good one.